and you're the only one where the event sold out within a couple of hours. What is it about someone who's been an MP for 7 years and never held ministerial office, or even been on his own party's front bench, that draws a crowd like that?
Well, I put it entirely down to your organisation and the fact that people want to come and hear you. And that as the series has grown, more people want to come along. It's very hard to see oneself as others see one. However hard one tries, and it's one of the great aims that one should have in life, to try and understand what do other people see positively and negatively about one's own attributes, which is quite difficult to analyse. And so the honest answer is I don't really know why people want to come. I can only guess. And my guess would be the hope that I might say something slightly controversial, but perhaps most importantly, that I'll say what I think. And therefore, if you ask me a question, with a bit of luck, I'll answer it without particularly thinking whether spin doctors would think that was a good answer or not. And I have a feeling that there is a desire in politics for less controlled answers, more straightforward answers, that people can then engage with and argue back about. I mean, I'm very flattered that there are protesters outside. That's great, because they want to engage in political debate. And that's really important, because I think my arguments are good arguments, and if I can engage in debate, I might be able to persuade people that conservatism is worth supporting.
Okay, well, we'll see if we can hold you to that answering questions as we proceed through for the next hour and a bit. Let's talk about the protest outside, because you are simultaneously maybe the most popular speaker we've invited to come along in the series since we've been running it for a year and a bit. But you're also the only one that's attracted a protest. So if I read to you the leaflet that was circulated from the Socialist Worker Student Society, you are apparently on the most reactionary wing of the Tory party. You're against abortion even in case of rape. You're a staunch opponent of gay marriage. You're against the rights of EU nationals to stay. You voted against laws to promote equality and human rights, and you're a warmonger who voted against investigations into the Iraq war. It goes on. To be fair, it goes on quite a lot. I'll paraphrase. But this is our campus, it says, and we shouldn't be inviting politicians who are against the welfare and freedom of our diverse student and staff body. You're not welcome at Queen Mary as a pro-LGBT, pro-choice and anti-racist campus. And then there's a picture of you in a top hat. Do you recognise, when you say that you sometimes struggle to see people as others see you, do you recognise yourself in that description?
Well, I'm sorry I didn't wear a top hat. I didn't realise it was compulsory. Had I done so, I'd obviously brought one along. Some things they say are simply wrong. That when you come to EU citizens, I said during the referendum campaign that I thought we should say, regardless of whether, what point we left, that anyone who was here legally should be welcome. And I actually think this is really important because, to my mind, people who have left their home and left their family, moved hundreds of miles to a country where they don't speak the language, to work hard and contribute to our society, and did so lawfully under laws we had passed, should be admired and respected, not treated as if they're not welcome. So European member state citizens who've come to the UK, we should admire and value and protect all their rights. So on that, it's simply wrong. On the inquiry into the Iraq war, there was one vote in Parliament when I was there, whilst the Chilcot inquiry was already going on. It's on theyworkforyou.com, and there were lots of votes when Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were in charge, which Labour routinely voted against. I was all in favour of an inquiry into the Iraq war. I'm not a warmonger. I've had grave doubts about what the government decided to do in Libya and in Syria. And so I think it's just, some of it's just mere abuse. But do I believe in the sanctity of life? Do I believe that life begins at the point of conception? Yes, very strongly. I do believe that. I think that is when a person is created. And that if you believe life begins at that point, then can you really say it's reasonable to take it? I don't believe in capital punishment either, for exactly the same reason. I don't think it's right for the state to take life.
of all the things I wanted to talk to you about, the one that I was absolutely determined I was not going to raise, because it seemed to me it had been covered remorselessly in almost any interview I'd read with you over the last couple of years, was the nappy thing. But almost everybody I've said, I'm doing this interview, they've said, well, what about the nappy? So it has clearly struck a chord with people. And as I understand it, your position is that despite having 6 children, you've never changed the nappy. And that's because, in your view, that's the nanny's job. And the nanny would be disgruntled with you were you to attempt to change a nappy because that's her job and you wouldn't do it very well. Is that a fair summary?
It's slightly more nuanced than that. You must bear in mind, the nanny we're talking about is my nanny, who's worked for my family for 52 years and still pretty much thinks of me as one of the children she's looking after. So nanny's views of these things are quite firmly held. You'd be amazed by how many men I've spoken to have either said to me, they've never changed any nappies either, or lucky me. I do recognise that I'm in a fortunate position, but it's absolutely true. Nanny would not think it was a good idea for me to be changing nappies. She thinks it's her job, and people do take a pride in their job. And I think it's important not to interfere in other people's roles.
But does that mean your wife hasn't changed the nappy either?
No. My wife's definitely changed lots of nappies.
You'll see where I'm going with this. Why is it okay for your wife? I mean, I understand the argument that says we employ the nanny changes the nappy. But why is it okay for your wife to do it, but not for you to do it?
I'm not sure nannies are too delighted that anybody other than nanny changes nappies, but it's simply the practicalities of life. But bear in mind, I'm not in a great deal of the time. I'm coming and doing things like this. It's not as if I'm at home 24 hours a day, whereas my wife is a stay-at-home mother.
You also said in one of these discussions about the nappy, you said, I've made no pretense to be a modern man at all, ever. A sentiment I understand, but objectively you are a modern man, aren't you? I mean, we are actually almost identical ages. I'm a month older than you. And I have to say, I'm loving this because most of my life I feel very crusty and old, and I'm now in the role of a sort of metrosexual hipster, which. But you know, we are modern men, aren't we? You can't pretend to be a throwback to the 18th century.
We are of the age that we are in, and I will confess my collar was pretty much blown yesterday when I was at the DEXU Select Committee. And I looked down at my suit and saw that it was absolutely covered in my 2-year-old's breakfast, that I had made the mistake of picking him out of his high chair. And really, I don't know how Nanny allowed me to do this, and I got permission, but nonetheless. And all his breakfast had appeared on my suit. So inevitably we are of the era that we are and can't live in a different era. I think what I'm really trying to get across by saying I don't pretend to be a modern man is I don't pretend to be anything other than what I am or who I am. That there isn't a facade that I'm putting forward, and that if we were sitting at home and having this discussion, my answers would be exactly the same. It's not something that I bring out for when I come to Queen Mary's College.